All right, now I'm going to go over how I would do UVs for the final delivery of the character model. So I've already done the body, so let's take a look at the other elements. So I just did the UVs very quickly on the hair in ZBrush using UV Master. And then I just imported the newly UV'd mesh as my new base mesh for the hair, so I can make sure that ZBrush has the most updated UV'd piece of geo. And I'm going through and I'm going to start organizing stuff. Oh, here's something that happens sometimes from an export in ZBrush. Sometimes your UVs aren't merged, so you want to make sure that your UVs are definitely merged from exporting from ZBrush. And I'm just using UVs as a selection tool, so I can separate out the thread from the buttons. So I'm just going to start organizing and naming. So just take a look at how I'm doing it. I'm trying to do it skin first and then costume later. And I'm also trying to do from the top of the costume to the bottom of the costume, kind of. It just makes more sense to do it that way for me. So I have like a skin group that includes hair, eyelashes, teeth if you have them, fingernails, and then everything under the costume group is going to be, any kind of clothing elements. So now I'm just naming all of my jewelry. And I'm picking a pretty simple naming convention. And what I'd recommend to help you out in your success doing this, make sure to pick a naming convention and just stick to it. Every company is going to be different, but as long as you're able to follow a naming convention, learning a new one is very easy. So now I'm just naming each element. And also, one thing to take note of, I'm separating everything, especially if there's a material difference. So I wouldn't, like some of the things I'll combine, like that watch face, because it's all the same material and it's not going to move. But I would never combine the watch base with the strap, because you would have to have facial selection and material assignments on a face. And in our pipeline, at least, it doesn't really work that way. You're going to want to make sure you can assign a separate material to any separate objects that you want. So now I'm going to hide the body and I'm going to start UVing only the clothing bits. So let's start with the bracelet. What I like to do is, whatever primitive it is, I'll do that kind of map first. So cylindrical unwrap. And then I'll rotate it until the seam makes sense. And then what I'll do is I'll pick a seam and separate it. And then I'll unfold, and it does a pretty good job unfolding. And sometimes I use the legacy tool and unfold horizontally and then vertically, and then I get a really good result that way. And now I'm doing the same exact kind of step on these thinner bracelets. So I'm selecting where my seam is going to be, and I'm detaching, and I'm cutting UV there. And then I'm using my legacy unfold. And then I'll use my layout tool to lay them out in a way that makes sense. Now I'm transferring UVs using transfer attributes options from one bracelet to the next. I'm going to go through each ring and do something similar. It's all a cylinder right now, so I'm just cutting where I want my seams and then unfolding. And that's just a really quick way to do your UVs. Now I'm transferring my maps or my UVs to the other rings that are identical. And I'm going to do the same step to this. It's all just cylinders and cubes, right? So it's all about kind of choosing which unwrap method is best, and then choosing which edges you want to be your seam edges, and then just continue to unfold and make sure your checkers are matching per island. So same deal with the watch strap. Probably gonna only select the strap, planar map it, and then planar map just the little leather wraps. Now I'm gonna select my edges that I want to select, and I've cut those UVs, and I've done the same thing where I'm just unwrapping and then laying out, and it's just as easy as that. So I auto-mapped this piece, but I might choose a different method in a second. If you notice, I made that piece of glass thick, and it's because Arnold's refraction really wants thickness in glass, so that's why I kept that thick. Sometimes when I auto-map, you can just merge edges if it makes sense, because you don't want all that together. That's a different way of shape to UV. So I just want as much room as possible and for the seams to make sense. So now I'm just separating out each element. Since I've combined all these into one, I can just kind of repeat the same process for all these little end bits. And just planar map that whole thing and then cut where I want, basically. So I'm just cutting seams, then I auto unfold all the bits, and it just kind of works out. Same thing for the ticks. Just auto unfold, and sometimes it takes several iterations, so I just keep applying it until I like it, and then laying out. So sometimes when things are combined, it's easy to just double click in face mode to select all of what's in the connecting faces. And then you can just deal with that piece by piece with your UVs. And I know it's sped up, but it's pretty quick if you do it this method. UVs should never be intimidating for you, especially after this. So now I'm just choosing to unfold each item and make sure it's the right scale. And some of these, since I started with a primitive, they already come with UVs, so it's really just a matter of unfolding and then ratioing the UVs. All right, for the pearl necklace, I might come back and rebuild that. For the glasses, I'm just doing a planar projection on the lenses, cutting, unfold, and then laying out my UVs. I'm going to do the same thing for each of these elements. Planar project the side, and then planar project the front area, and then cut out my seams, and repeat. Unfold horizontal, unfold vertical, layout. All right, great. Now I'm just going to recreate the pearls in my pearl necklace because I don't want to deal with bad UVs. So my trick is to make a new pearl, UV it the way I want, make it the right size, and then what I can do, I'm just matching the size, then what I can do is separate all of these pearls, center the pivots, create a locator with a lockunlock.mel from Creative Crash, and then I replace objects with my new objects. So I can delete my old pearls, and now I have all UV'd new pearls at the center pivot of each one of those. So I'm just double checking to make sure that that matches my old one close enough. So now all these have UVs, and I don't have to deal with any messiness. And now what I'll do is for straps, or for strings and straps and stuff, I'll unitize. And then you select everything but the edge that you want your seam, and then you just merge them. All right, now for the shoes, I'm just UVing each portion. Again, same exact technique where I'll do a general planar map and then just select where I want my seams to be cut and unfold. So I'm just going through each piece, making sure that it's being unfolded the way I want. Once you understand how UVs work, they're a breeze. All right, I'm just making sure all of my checkers are the right size. And now I already made my UVs nice, so I'm just going to delete. I just deleted my other shoe so I can duplicate it and mirror it over. So now all I have to do is mirror those UVs and move them to the right. And then I can lay them all out at once. Save that. And now I'm going to pick my UV ratio using the Maya checker size tool. You can also get that off of Creative Crash. And the reason for this is I want to make sure that all of my clothing and my accessories and jewelry are all the same UV ratio. And what that means is it takes up the same amount of space, texture space, so that if I wanted to apply a generic noise as a look dev artist, it would be very easy to do that. And also you're not wasting space that you don't need to waste, or making a piece too high res for no reason. Everything's going to be the right size this way. For the skirt, it's a little large, and I want to be able to fit them into 4 tiles. So I'm just going to manipulate it a little bit to make sure that it's the right scale. And I think that should be okay, as long as it's close enough. It doesn't have to be perfect, the scale, but as long as it's not a hugely noticeable difference in texture size, you'll be okay. So now I'm just going through each costume element and laying them out with the right spacing that I want. And you don't want 2 little pixels separating your UV islands. The reason for that is you don't want to have bleed issues in your Mari file. It just makes things nice and clean. So I'm just hand laying out my jewelry in a configuration that makes sense, so that I'm maximizing my UV space. And I'm just kind of going through and making sure each of my costume elements kind of fit in a square. And in this case, it looks like I can fit all of them into 2 squares, and then the cloth elements are in their own set. So some of these, you notice I'm going very quickly and using layout. It's just because I'm very comfortable with the layout tool. I can go in and kind of know that it's going to size everything up the way I want. And then it gives you nicely packed shells for like just all the pearls, for example. All right, now that I have skin and clothes all on separate UVs, so when you apply one texture map with a UDIM, that's the only texture map you ever have to plug into IDI Shader. So there's no keeping track of U1V1 shirt and U1V1 sunglasses and U1V1 bracelet. It's all just one map for all UV tiles for the character. So now I'm just UVing the fingernails. And I'm exporting each piece as an OBJ so I can replace all the level 1s of my Z tools. And I know that each one of them will have the correct UVs. So I'm just going down to division 1 for everything. And actually for the shirt and the skirt, I think I'm going to make those level 2 and delete the first level. And all I'm doing now is re-importing all of my elements that I just UV'd. Underpants, I'm gonna skip those. And it's really the most important only for elements that are gonna have displacements baked out from. So if your object doesn't have a displacement map for it, for example, the earrings probably wouldn't have that, then it doesn't really matter if you update it or not. I just like keeping things clean. So I'm just going through and importing all of my objects, all the latest and greatest from my model. And I'll just name this guy and save it. And now I have a fully updated, every single subtool that matters is updated to the latest UVs. Let me import this guy too. And now I'm going to be able to bake all my maps from the pieces that I know that need displacement map exports. So if you import that low-res OBJ at level 1 for each subtool, all your UVs are going to update and you can divide back up and all your detail remains. All right, let's move on to the next step.